Welcome to the last part of architectures. We will continue our topic with messaging architecture. So, as usual, I'll provide a metaphor. So, here's the metaphor for the discussion that we're going to discuss. Um, A messaging architecture decouples our services, so it allows us to um, separate the service instead of having it coupled to each other. So I'll provide a diagram, so just bear with me. So the more communication channels you have, the more direct dependencies are created for uh, direct communication. So it must be avoided because components with many dependencies are more difficult to detach from the overall system. So here's the diagram of direct communication, and then here's the diagram of a system that has a messaging architecture. In this case, it's a messaging system, but one of the one of the best metaphor for that is a post office. So imagine messaging architecture is a post office. So instead of connecting your house or via tunnel, underground tunnel, just for them to communicate, you just need a one post office and have that post office send it to your uh, corresponding recipient. So that's the metaphor for messaging architecture. Now here's the diagram for that. There's a nuance on this messaging architecture for service-oriented architecture that we've discussed in the previous video. The service-oriented architecture um, can only be I mean the difference of this messaging architecture in service-oriented architecture is that it's isolated to the service-oriented architecture because microservice architecture can also have messaging architecture on its backend or on its server. However, for service-oriented architecture, it's as is, or it only it can't apply a direct communication because it will violate its main principle, which is the coupling of services. So it has an advantages and disadvantages. Web service architecture, so that's the next topic. So here is an example of messaging architecture in service-oriented architecture. As you can see, guys, it's on the server and it separate all the service on the service side. So for web service architecture, it's going to be brief because a Google Chrome and website is a simple example of web service architecture. The Google Chrome use HTTPS to connect it. So whenever you're trying to develop an application, you just need to have it available on HTTP or create it via the standard so that it's available or accessible on the web. The issue with the microservice and service oriented and all the architecture we've discussed is that it can be applied in a private environment. So in that case, it's not really available onto the web unless you use the specific technologies available in the web, such as REST, SOAP, and etc. like we discussed in the previous videos. So to create a web service architecture, you need to send a request via HTTP, and then there must be a response, and there must be a request and response header, like we've discussed in the previous videos. So the connection of that in this metaphor is that imagine an open house gate where every third party app uh, are able to connect, or has like the main language such as English that allows them to communicate with the uh, applications, or houses inside it. So despite their different architectures. So this next topic is MVC. Uh, MVC is the MV architecture, part of the MV architecture that we've discussed in the previous videos. MVC is a model view controller. It has been created to separate the view and the model. So let's say on that open house, you have a manager or a caretaker inside this open house gate. So in this open house gate, there's a lot of house with different architectures. It could be MVC, which is the topic that we're discussing, and then it could be MVP, Model View Presenter, and then it could be Model View View Model. So we'll discuss the distinction of those three. But first, we will discuss the model view controller. So for the model view controller, inside that open house, let's speak English, you have this controller or caretaker that manages the occupants' belongings. So, or model, and then it communicate with the view or the decoration outside the house. So when whatever decoration on the house that this tenant or model wants to use, it communicates it via caretaker. So that's what the MVC does in Kinsight. But basically, the view is separate to the model or the data. It has a controller in the middle. So here's the MVC applied in the classic web application. Remember, in the classic web application, most of the presentation layer are implemented in the server side, unlike in the modern, which most of the presentation are in the client side. So here, as you can see, guys, in the server, the presentation has routing engine. So this routing engine could be Express, and it has a template agent engine as well that it returns to the client, such as HTML, like pre-configured HTML. And here's the controller, which updates the view. So let's say the customer updates a button. Let's say Amazon. Let's say the we click a cart here. What happened is that this user action is being routed to the controller, usually Express. This controller communicate via HTTP because it's now available using a web service architecture. As you can see, guys, there's multiple architecture that has been applied in just one example. In this controller, it expects a request from HTTP, such as REST, Express, and then that controller updates the model or the data. And then this model can update the controller, and then it can access the view. So this type of architecture is like a tenant that talks to a caretaker to manage the decoration outside the house. So let's say the tenant wants a certain things outside the house, provided that he will pay more than the appropriate rent for the decoration. Then he needs to speak with the caretaker. But he can also check it and then kind of like change the decoration outside of the house unconsciously because there's no security. The decoration of the house is not secured. So that's like the MVC controller. So the reason why there's a security or something is that in model view presenter, which is another type of MV architecture, the model view presenter, the decoration outside the house is locked or restricted. The only person that could communicate or could change that is the caretaker. There's no other person. I mean, the tenant could not change it unconsciously. So that's the difference for that presenter. But here is a diagram. As you can see, there's no updates here from model to view. There isn't a connection anymore because it's all decoupled to the presenter. Again, guys, the main idea of this is to decouple the model and the view. And this another thing with this is it has been implemented way back on the desktop application before web service or before the uh, proliferation of Google Chrome or browsers that allow us to communicate via HTTP. So this separation are make sure that the system are independent or the services are independent so that you can easily adapt or your application adapt uh, even decades after. So um, an open house that speak English and that inside that open houses you have that well thought architecture that could last like decades or sometimes like a century, right? So those kind of architecture that we're talking about. So here I forgot to mention here, this is the MVC model view controller diagram for modern web application. As you can see, guys, the presentation are imported in the client side because we've mentioned in the modern web application, the views or the pages is in the client side. Like it's like my blogging web application. So that's what you call single web page application, wherein the views are hidden to the user. So it's all mostly downloaded on the client, and then you just a lot of views are just hidden unless the user act in a certain way that allows it to access it. So here, the Chrome uses its template engine. So the browser now uses its template engine, which is the pre-configured HTML, and its own routing engine to route it in the client side or in the browser. And here's the present model view uh, presenter. And here, the last part is the model view model. So the idea behind this is to provide corresponding data fields in the view model for each UI element of the view that can be changed by the user. So the idea here is that whenever the user change view, it's still decoupled, but whenever the user, like, let's say, enter something on the form, it's directly connected to the data field in the model. So it has a corresponding ID or data field or field in the back end so that it's interconnected. So it's bidirectional. Let's say the developer changed something on the data field in the backend, it immediately changed something in the view. Another thing about these architectures is that one data, since that is decoupled, the view and the model is decoupled, you can have multiple views in one model or data. So you can represent one same data in different views. However, in this view model is that this view and model is interconnected. If you change the model, you will change the view as well. And if you change the view, you will change the model as well. So it's easy in developers' perspective to implement this application or architecture. So it's like in the open house metaphor, it's like an automated pulley system that automatically change the occupant's furniture whenever the occupants allows it. So he doesn't really, it's still decoupled, but the occupant can immediately change it, and vice versa. When you change something on the automated pulley system, it automatically generates some furniture or some decoration outside the house. And in the next topic, we will discuss using programming language on the server side. Uh, First, types of programming language. Programming language by their degree of abstraction. Programming language can be classified into different categories provided. Here, there's a higher programming language, which is the JavaScript. And then these higher programming language are translated to machine code. So JavaScript is actually quite abstract from the zeros and ones that the machine actually speaks. Assembly language, on the other hand, are much less abstract. They do not require you to work with zeros and ones either, but nevertheless, they do require you to. They are relatively cryptic, and programming is comparatively complex compared to JavaScript. So if you think, guys, that programming in JavaScript is complex and hard, uh, working with assembly language would destroy your head, guys. So just a warning. And then in the next videos, that's about our last topic, guys. To sum it up, we discussed the uh, different types of architectures. Again, this is the most complicated part, but there could be n or infinite number of architectures or tiers. That what makes it complicated. But we discussed some of this. It's basic, and now you can now go ahead and check all the advanced architectures. There's a host of books available as well on tackling this architecture. I recommend you checking them, guys. And again, in the next videos, we will continue with different types of programming language. In this case, we'll discuss compiled and interpreted programming language, and then uh, we'll go from there. All right. So thank you for watching, and see you on the next video. Peace.